Hey folks, I was editing this and I realized we forgot to do the intro. I'm George, and as always, I'm joined with my dear friend Ryan, and this is the Citizen Game podcast where we talk about games that are trying to have a point, and maybe even some politics. Hope you enjoy. Essentially, this game is my origin story. Sadly enough, it's the game that I played in high school, and we're like, oh my god, this game is so deep and everything. Because before this, I was playing Fable 3, which I think even Fable fans don't like that game, so I can shit on it. And Fable 3 was so boring that I was like, I think I'm about done with video games. I think I've had a good run, but this is boring now. I've seen everything I can see. And then my friend, he was like, oh, I've got this crazy game. It's like war crimes and shit. You gotta try it. And so I was like, okay, I'll try it. So I went into Spec Ops not with I had some idea that it was going to be different. I wasn't completely blind oh, I'm going to play a typical modern military shooter, because then I probably wouldn't have played it. And so I play it, and despite kind of having an idea of it, all that shit, like the white phosphorus scene and everything, that just, rocks my world. And I'm just completely taken by it. It's such a way where it's like, okay, so if you like movies, you're a cinephile. You have an identity. You can kind of form an identity off of liking movies that's respected in a certain sense. And the gamer identity is cringe and stupid, playing on Xbox Live and stuff. And so silly high school me is seeing this and seeing all the fucking think pieces written about this. And it's me, and I know I'm not alone, because this is where all the video essayist shit comes from. It's oh, this is an opportunity to form a sort of thinking man's consumer identity for this video game shit. And so, you get what I'm saying. It's even though I'm thinking, I thought about it in the sense of oh, I'm playing this thing that has a message, and now I feel like a better person. And even people fall into that trap all the time. Because at the end of the day, it's just as the years went by, I'm just looking back in retrospective, and it's that is just silly commodity fetishism dressed up as kind of some avant-garde intellectualism. Because I'm 18. And so when I replayed this game, I distanced myself enough where it's okay, I just want to... Is there anything still left for this? Because this game has been talked about to death. And will I still find something about it worthwhile? And I actually want to say yes. And my question to you is basically the same thing. What do you think? Did it still get to you in some sort of emotional, thought-provoking way at all?
Okay, so I think I had almost the exact same experience in that I played this when I was... what year did this come out?
2013?
So I played it, I believe, in 2015 or 2016 when I was 17 or 18. I don't exactly remember. On my brother's... On my little brother... 2012, yeah. So I played it in 2015, 2016. My junior or senior year of high school. And I played it on my brother's Xbox because I didn't buy it. My brother had just bought it. And I don't know if he knew what it was. But I definitely knew what it was. I didn't know the twist. I didn't know, about...
But you knew it was not...
I knew it was
Modern
not...
Warfare 3.
Yes, I knew it was not Modern Warfare 2. I knew it was trying to be smarter. I knew it was because I think I remember seeing the Angry Joe video about it.
Amazing.
Yes, I saw Angry Joe, and he was like, "This game is so deep," and I was kind of confused by that because I was like, "This just looks like Call of Duty bullshit," which I liked at the time, you know.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I had deliberately avoided seeing any of the specific plot development stuff, so those did still have an impact on me, like you. The white phosphorus. Like I have a distinct memory.
The big
of playing.
moments.
Yes, of playing the white phosphorus sequence and seeing the people in the ravine and being like, "Oh, I'm gonna get them," and I remember how much that made the reveal hit.
And that's a part where people play it now, and it's hard because a lot of people kind of
know the twist.
And it is, I guess you could say, telegraphed. If you have any sort of sense of what you're looking for, you see a big clump of like something, and you're like, okay. And if you know this game's reputation,
yeah.
If you heard of the white phosphorus scene, you know what's
coming.
coming.
If I did not know there was a white phosphorus, I think I might have heard the phrase, but I wasn't sure. Well, I don't remember. My memories are kind of hazy. And that scene is that's the game showing its hand.
I think it's interesting though, because I know we both said we knew something was different about it. It's a little bit of a misconception that this game was ever made to trick people. At least in the sense of like, yeah, in the plot it kind of is. But marketing-wise, they were always marketing this thing as it's a different shooter, which was always a struggle to actually show that with the trailers. But like I'm going to reference Walt Williams' book, Significant Zero, a ton. So when I just say Walt Williams, that's what I'm referencing. But from the get-go, they were like, I'm almost quoting verbatim. It's like, let's make a military shooter with some fucked up shit in it, where the player would go, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, but the problem is, because there is a fake out in the game, and it aesthetically so much looks...
Yes.
Like generic Call of Duty bullshit. Like every video game says it's different. Every video game is going to say it has something new, and the fact that it can't tell you what the new thing is.
It's only other people, like word of mouth, that you go, no, for real this time.
Yeah. The only way that's the real nature of the game was able to spread was in the months after its release. Because that's how I heard about it, and that's how I knew this is like something special that I should play. And not just fucking Battlefield Bad Company. Any of the generic runoff of Call of Duty.
Battlefield, or no, what's the best one? Medal of Honor Warfighter.
Yeah. Yeah, all the generic awesome. runoff of Call of Duty 4. All the games that come out of the ripple effects of Call of Duty 4.
And of course, this game's kind of more, it's actually more of a successor, at least very lightly to, well, it's a franchise, technically, because it is a part of the same series as a PS1, like Spec Ops, I don't remember the fucking subtitles, but they were just like generic, tactical, modern shooters, because that's what those games were like before Call of Duty 4, is they were a lot like slower paced and probably boring, and with some like light squad tactics.
Yes, the last one, so there were 9 Spec Ops games before the line.
I didn't realize there were so many.
All released from 98 to 2002.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And then there's a 10-year gap, and then Spec Ops The Line just drops.
Clearly just like 2K, like, what do we got?
Slapping a name on it to make it more sellable to the studio.
Which is funny, because...
Which is fine.
I think most people would go, this was a series before? I mean, I don't know. Maybe people older than us would go, I remember my dad
that's what I'm saying.
That
it's not selling it to the players, it's selling it to the studio.
Right, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It's like, this is... Because studios in 2012, and even more now, want pre-sold properties. So if they'd said, we're going to make this very dark game that's supposed to, like, fuck with the player and is kind of an anti-commercial premise. And they sold that to 2K. They would just be like, how do we sell that? And then so to appease the morons in the marketing department, they were like, oh, well, haha, what if we made it a sequel to this beloved classic series that no one has thought about in 10 years?
Also, people tend to say things like, the gameplay in this game is intentionally boring or mediocre. And, no, it's not intentional. I understand that, it's oh, Jesus. How do I talk about this without opening a whole can of worms? But my point is, what did you think of just the meat and potatoes of this show?
Yeah, before we discuss the plot, yeah. The tactical stuff felt pointless. I never used it.
Like the right bumper.
Yeah. I would always press that by accident while trying to do something else, but I never really felt the need to use it.
I used it a few times just when it's like I'm pinned down or whatever, which, I guess mission accomplished, because that is what you use it for. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. My take on the gameplay being deliberately shitty or boring or whatever is I don't know if that's true, but I distinctly remember playing it the first time in 2015, 2016, and it did make me want to stop doing it.
At what point, though?
Near the end, I got really frustrated. But then I realized that's good.
That's a good... Yeah,
I don't care if it's intentional, but the fact that I feel exhausted and want this to end is also how the main character feels.
It's a slog. It's a proper slog that feels... I guess I just want to say, I don't think... If you slap this... if you put this gameplay in basically the story you would expect, I think people, I think it would be fine. I think people shit on it. Out of all the third-person shooters I've played, I like this more than most of them. I don't think we could support a fucking, 12-hour campaign. But I enjoy the shooting in this game more than Uncharted and I don't know, Gears of War even, which that's probably most people disagree with me on that. Just to say, it's a polished. I like the lethality of it. You shoot guys and they die, and of course,
what an innovation.
Versus more bullet spongy enemies. Yeah, I've been playing Gears of War 2. This is why this stuff's on my mind.
Yeah.
I think I was watching there's a guy named Racevic, his video on it, and if you want a good breakdown of just gameplay mechanical stuff, I think he does a good job and basically says there is something here. It does have an identity. It's not completely generic because the enemies are pretty good at flanking you. And they don't give you a lot of... they actually kind of drown you for ammo more than other shooters do of this type, usually. So just gives it a little bit of an edge and a little bit of an identity.
Yeah, you do have to switch guns.
Not enough to... Yeah, and you know what?
Your guns will run out of ammo and you have to pick something else up.
That never happens in a Call of Duty campaign. And that's not much, but it's something... Not enough to carry a whole game, but that's where we have set pieces and writing and all the other stuff. The added value of the third-person shooter. This was a game that was
never supposed... They were never selling it on the gameplay.
Right.
That's not really... That's not why you play the game.
That's the plight of the third-person shooter. And then and like I said, the added value actually is quite a lot and ties into... the fucking gameplay. And and also, okay, so now just talking about basic stuff that gives this an identity of its own. Before a lot of the lead people came on, they wanted to set this in Dubai. That was already an early decision.
Mm-hmm.
And that does most shooters, they do... Modern Warfare, the fucking reboot, the most recent one, they made up just like a fake
They
Middle
made up
Eastern
fake
country.
Syria.
Yes, they made
It's
fake
set in
Syria.
not Syria. You fight with the not Kurds.
Yeah,
And all these like fake, like that are clearly specific things in the real world, but we're just gonna try to jack off about not being political, quote unquote, by making them fake.
Yeah, which is so insulting in the sense of like, oh, we can say London. You know, these guys are from London because you fuckers know what that is. You don't know what Syria is, and most of these shooters do unspecified-istan.
Yeah,
and
like even in Call of Duty, the Modern Warfare original 3 games, like you have the fake Middle Eastern country, like not Iraq, that gets invaded. And then you just have Russia. Like, they don't make up a fake
you
Russia.
already pointed out, Russia's fine. You can always do Russia.
You can always do Russia, especially, not to date our episode, but obviously now.
Yeah, you can
especially. But you could always do Russia because they're, just foreign enough, but still white.
So the choices with Dubai, basically, they picked it because it was cool. They picked it because kind of just how weird Dubai is of nothing existed. One of the quotes is basically nothing existed here, and overall it seems very fragile, because it's just not fucking water. I mean, and the game deals with the water issue.
Dubai is also interesting. Because I believe this game was banned in the UAE.
Interesting.
For its depiction of Dubai as being destroyed. They were offended by that. And Dubai is interesting as so Dubai lets them have that image of the Burj Khalifa in the distance. The tower you're always moving towards.
And just height in general and spectacle. The height of Dubai, yeah. But
Dubai is the ultimate fragility, not just topographic in terms of climate, but in terms of economics. Because Dubai is entirely riding the float of the Gulf oil market. And if that ever goes away, what would happen to those buildings is a genuine question. If the oil ever stops flowing.
Yeah, and it's just I don't know. It's just interesting. And it's interesting because when they depict other countries in these, like I said, in us unspecified-istan, they depict them probably, in the most generic way possible in the imaginations of Americans, where it's we've got these sort of brick buildings and desert but setting it here, it is a very there's malls. You fight in malls. You have the mixture of it's like a desert Middle East country like you dumb pigs are used to, but it's also a quote-unquote modern country that is basically most of its money comes from tourism, from people like you and from people all over the world. And that just adds a different flavor to it. I guess there's no better time just to get into it. I picked up on, they explicitly, the 33rd is in Afghanistan, which is they name drop Afghanistan, which is,
yes, they name drop Kabul specifically because that is where Conrad and Walker met. And
they go from Afghanistan to here, a friendly, modernized country.
To do disaster relief.
Yes, and then fuck it up.
Yes, everything goes wrong. That is another thing that might point to why they're willing to have it be set in a real country, is that you're not primarily fighting that country's people or military. You're primarily fighting Americans.
Which
the vast majority of the game.
It's just kind of ballsy.
I guess, in that, you are. There's a moment in the game. Okay, so you know how they have those judgy loading screens?
Yes.
Where it's one of the loading tips later, because that's just kind of as the game turns into what it really is. The loading tips start out as generic, press to throw a grenade or whatever. And then later it's this is your fault.
Which I will say, that I think actually is a little overboard. Like,
Yeah,
that's one of those things where I thought it was cool at the time, but that is what does feel a little bit too much. Like, you're talking to me instead of me just experiencing this game. But I don't know. It's so iconic.
It is playing with the conventions of the genre.
That's true.
Because the loading screen tips are like universal, but having them just say shit like "you are still a good person,"
yes,
or whatever. But one of them is how many Americans have you killed today?
Yes, I remember that one.
I don't know how implicitly if that is implicitly just buying into like it's worse because you're killing Americans.
So you're touching on something I was leading towards, which is the duality of how this game is making you feel guilty. And my point being, are you shooting American soldiers because they wouldn't expect you to feel guilty for the heinousness of shooting people from that? I mean, you do shoot civilians, or you can at some point.
Yes, and that is treated as worse.
Yeah, and then and that's my whole thing with setting it in Dubai, is we're going to have this game that's critiquing, the military and video game violence, and it's like, does it feel, is there a not as awesome element of this? It's like, in order to do that, do we actually have to set it in a civilized country? If that makes any sense. Do you know what I'm saying?
I get what you mean, yeah. Like setting it in a city instead of...
We can't just make it a game where you feel bad about killing Afghans. Or like I mean, obviously,
right.
Like, you can't, I mean...
But then if you do that, then you create a scenario where you just slaughter tons of foreigners to teach the American hero a lesson.
That's true.
And the implicitly American or Western player a lesson. And the way of having the people you kill to learn the lesson also be American is like a way of getting around that. So this game isn't just... It's not something that's used derisively about Israeli movies a lot and American movies about war is called shooting and crying.
Yeah, okay.
Where the sort of whatever country hero kills, anonymous, faceless brown people from some foreign country, but then he feels bad about it. And that's kind of what this game would be if your enemies were not just rogue Americans, like a shoot and cry movie.
This whole game has this air, this like surrealism, in not exactly fantasy, but everything feels just a little bit off, and
right.
We're having to do with shooting Americans and the sort of super sandstorm.
Right, and this is because it is science fiction.
Which, let me be clear, I love that. I still like, that's what kind of struck me replaying it again, is just the concept of itself is pretty great.
Right, and especially also the events that are like, he was in Kabul, quote unquote, with Conrad, Walker and Conrad. And so was that, like, the radio man.
Yes, yeah.
But what happened in Kabul is not clear. Like, what happened in Afghanistan in this timeline is not explicit, ever. Except there's a reference to the Kabul death squads.
Right, I took note of that, death squads.
Right. But they never explain exactly what happened in Afghanistan that how Conrad saved Walker's life, what exactly happened in Kabul that resulted in whatever they experienced there. So they reference the Afghanistan war, but it seems like something happened in the game's timeline that didn't happen in real life in Kabul and in Afghanistan.
It's so vague, though,
Yeah, no, that's why I is that because the characters they all know what happened in Afghanistan, and so they don't feel the need to talk about it. And it also doesn't matter, except that Kabul is how Walker and Conrad know each other. But you don't need to have any, like, intense exposition about what happened. And it also makes it scarier.
Which, you're pointing out just, like, one of many just good storytelling aspects of this game, which I guess I'd like to say, again, replaying it, we talk about nailing the basics with these sorts of games, and it's like, yeah, you may want to critique the finer points of, what if, like, player agency, and what if the player is feeling like this though, but this game just has it's just well done. It's coherent. Every element of this game is pointing towards a thematic goal, and I guess I'm just saying, kind of in a wordy way, it's just well done, in just a basic way that's engaging still.
So should we talk about some specifics of the plot then?
Yeah. So if we're going in order, they go in.
They arrive and they're fighting.
The first time you shoot locals.
Yes, and that's actually something.
They mentioned Farsi, which again is more than any other game I feel like of this genre would ever care to like.
But
what?
So I was struck by how long it takes to get to the rug pulls. Like because how many chapters is it before you start? I think it's 4? 3 or 4 chapters before you start fighting Americans?
Yes, that's about it.
Which I, in my brain, had edited that down. I did not think it was that long. And then
you're just pushing through fighting guys, and then I think they fall through a roof.
Right. And then, so the building collapsing, finding out that you're fighting in the hotel, and then they blow up the hotel and all that shit. That's all fighting local militias.
And then we find out the CIA.
The CIA is running them, and then after that, then we run into, because you save that guy from the 33rd, and then he tries to kill you because he thinks you're CIA.
Yeah. Which I just love. The first moment you start fighting American troops, and you have that, like, stop fucking shooting us, we're not CIA, and it's the first time you're shooting American soldiers, everybody's screaming. It's just a great moment.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very chaotic.
And if we want to just talk about, like I said, there's the pitfall of feeling very deeply about something and then viewing that as like an instructional moral text. But games can teach you very practical things. Like when I was like 17 and I see this story of like the CIA, rounding up locals to, start sort of a militia group and everything. They didn't teach me about things like that happening, like, in the past. And so it was like, oh, this is based off like a real things that happened in the past.
Yeah.
Leads you down, Wikipedia rabbit holes and things like that.
Yeah. And then, so after that, it takes like a long time after that before the white phosphorus. Like that also surprised me. In my brain, the real game doesn't start until the white phosphorus.
And that's chapter 8, which is basically halfway through the game.
Yeah, that's the thing. That was so crazy replaying it. Because I did not realize that's how it was structured. I always remember the white phosphorus happening like maybe a quarter to a third of the way through the game. Okay,
so yeah, and the problem is that scene, it just has a gravitational pull, like so before we like get to that. Oh, okay. Let's talk about the moral choice. The first moral choice where you shoot Gould or not. There's all this shit before the fucking...
Right. You have shooting Gould. Does anything ever come of that?
No, but it's... I think it's kind of instructional in the sense of like, this is how we're doing choices. Because... So about like the dumbass moral choices in BioShock.
Yes.
Where it's like press X to like murder a child, and press B to don't do that.
Right.
Yeah, the right answer.
Right.
This game these choices were deliberately designed because this is 2K, and you have some of the same executive and even some of the same creatives, including Walt Williams, deliberately going. we want moral choices, and they're not stupid. And part of that, besides just like the writing, is, okay, if you are choosing to kill someone, then you should be able to just choose it with the mechanics of your game, which is a shooter.
Which is shoot them.
Yeah, and so it's instructional because if you shoot Gould, he dies. And you go, oh my god, maybe, you know?
You mean because you're not trying to shoot Gould, right? If you shoot at him, if you shoot at the hostage guy, Takers, he dies.
Sorry, not Gould. There's the first Marine, who he points a gun at you, and he's like, if you don't, I'll take you to our leader. You don't trust him. It's very early on, and you can choose to shoot him or not. Yeah, sorry, I got that confused with Gould.
Because that's when he rappels down, and then that's the area where you first fight the 33rd.
Yeah. Or you fight more. Also, awesome scene where he, like, gets distracted, pulls the CIA's gun, and shoots him in the head. That was just awesome. That guy got owned, and I thought that was cool.
Yes. Because Gould is the choice to rescue him. Because I don't think that guy you're saving has a name.
Right. I just put Gould on him. But yeah, then the next choice is that the big one, or at least the first big one where you choose to save...
The civilians or Gould?
Yeah.
I chose to save the civilians. Does Gould die no matter what?
If you forget about the civilian... Yeah, he dies no matter what.
Yeah, because I assumed you couldn't have that character potentially live in the whole game.
Yeah, because he's already kind of fucked up. But you also kind of have... well, what I was going to say was, like... They understand in this game that... It's not always like the consequences of what matters with the choice. In fact, with like the later revealed hallucinating choices, literally no consequences, but it's about what it makes you feel, and that's why.
Right, but well, it's also about what it makes you feel when you learn it was fake.
Yeah, I mean, for this choice, there is like a
right.
consequence, a direct consequence, but it doesn't. People want that like people got mad about like Mass Effect, and and this is like the expectation with like some adventure games. Like, people get mad about like the original, or some people like The Walking Dead. All those choices, a lot of them don't even matter, and it's like, okay, it's not always about like the literal game consequences. It's about what it's... this sounds corny, but it's what it says about you. If you're willing to just engage with it on an emotional level. And again, you make that choice by either shooting the dude or you follow... not Lugo.
Lugo's the guy who wants you to shoot the guy.
You follow Adams for the civilian.
Yes, you follow Adams to save the civilians. You shoot to... Lugo tells you to shoot. And you do. But, so you've got all that. And that's another interesting thing about this game that kind of makes it... I don't know what it's trying to... I think it's to try to make it feel more like a movie. And that is, then you're later introduced to the Radio Man. And you get him playing, like, classic rock.
Yeah, and it's pretty... it's on the nose. In the sense that... you have, do you remember the Nowhere to Run song?
Yes.
By Martha Reeves, and I was like, that was like on Good Morning Vietnam.
Yeah.
Like, he plays that song. The Black Angels, there features two songs, which are basically a 70s psychedelic throwback group, which there's like a ton of. And... that's the one that plays in the big mall shootout where it's, he's like, I'm going to play you off stage and stuff. And also, literally, the other song is called, like, The First Vietnam War or some shit like that. Just directly a, like, protest song, like a throwback protest song.
Yeah.
And most of them are kind of that variety. You have, of course... the national anthem, played by Jimi Hendrix.
These are all meant to evoke Vietnam.
Yeah,
they all evoke.
It's cool that it's all diegetic.
Yeah.
Also, I this is completely random, but The song that's playing on the radio when Ellie is like killing all those slaver guys in The Last of Us 2 is a Black Angel song.
Huh.
I think it's completely random, but I just thought I'd point it out.
What was I going to say?
Radio Man.
Radio Man.
Movie stuff.
Yes, it's supposed to make it feel more like a movie. And Radio Man is when we start to... unless, in the case the name Colonel Conrad didn't give it away, the whole game's plot is kind of a riff on Heart of Darkness / Apocalypse Now. With Walker...
But it's important that it's not an adaptation.
No.
Because people will say that, and that's not really not like Apocalypse Now is way closer to Heart of Darkness than this game is to either of them.
Yes. But it's still taking its overall character. It definitely is taking its sort of at least 3 of its characters.
Yes.
Which are Walker, who is Marlowe / Willard. Then you have Conrad, who is obviously Kurtz in both versions. And then you have the Radio Man, who is the Harlequin / Dennis Hopper's character.
Yeah, who has like
Apocalypse Now.
like a bigger role in this.
He has a bigger role than either of them.
Yeah,
because the Harlequin and and I don't remember his name.
Yeah, me neither.
I don't even know if he has a name. He might just be called like the Journalist or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they give the he's literally just called American Photojournalist.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But Radio Man, so none of them have a proper name because you have the Harlequin, the Journalist, and Radio Man. But who is also a journalist. But yeah, Radio Man this is kind of a spoiler. I mean, obviously we're going to spoil it anyway. Is the main villain?
Yeah.
Radio Man is the main villain because initially they assume he is in charge of the remnants of the 33rd.
Right.
Then, after they think they get confirmation that Conrad is alive and giving orders, they believe that was false and that he's just speaking for Conrad. But with the twist at the end, it basically is implied that yes, Radio Man had basically taken control of the 33rd.
Which is weird.
Yeah, this civilian journalist had somehow created like I guess, in Conrad's absence, a cult in the 33rd.
Yeah, and it's all very vague of like what sort of organization the 33rd has left.
Do the average members of the 33rd know that Conrad's dead? I don't think that's ever made clear.
Yeah, and it's hard for this not to like splinter out into talking about the whole game.
Yeah,
is not necessarily literal.
Right.
And there, like theoretically, there is real events that happened in Dubai, but you're never gonna know them. Not
right.
At least the whole. I think the closest you get is like kind of those intel sections because it's like recorded information that feels very
right because concrete. You have Conrad so you find the radio that's actually broken, and Conrad talks to you. Like, what was the real Conrad doing? What was he like? Because you find Conrad's command staff burned alive with white phosphorus. Did he do that? Or did Radio Man order that after Conrad died? Or did the insurgents do that? It's never clear. It's not clear exactly what Conrad was doing when he was still alive. Other than that he led an evacuation, it failed, and he felt guilty and killed himself.
But it's, like, unclear in, like, not a dumb way.
No, I think it's deliberately unclear, because we never actually meet the real Conrad.
And I think, like, I think, this all works very well for a video game. In the sense of, if you're making and I guess now we can talk about just like, there's always the abstraction and weirdness of the actions you take in a video game are kind of silly if it's a third-person shooter. You know, you're gunning down literally, 5,000 soldiers. And this whole surrealness and dreamlike, but dreamlike in a way. I mean, it gets more obvious as it goes on.
Mm-hmm.
There's already an unreality to the whole thing, and I think that lends itself well to the format of this shooting game. I mean, like, when you're killing, like, the spawn points and like a very like gamer criticism of this is that they just spawn bad guys at you, and the spawn points are kind of obvious.
Yeah.
And maybe you're thinking about for a second, like, wait, where the fuck are these guys actually coming from? And if the game wasn't working for you, I guess that just seemed, it's video game silliness. But this combined with everything else, it just makes it feel more surreal and weird.
Yeah. Yeah, there's also, like, a question that I maybe thought about a bit, which is, like, how big is the 33rd?
Do they mention, like, what kind of... Do they mention, like, the name of the... is it a
battalion?
A company or whatever, like...
It's a battalion.
Okay, how big is a battalion?
Right, because they would be under the command of a colonel. 300 to 1,000.
You definitely kill more than...
You definitely kill more than that, yeah.
Yeah.
At least according to Wikipedia. A battalion is typically... but technically it's just defined as... it would be under the command of a... wait, hang on. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, you kill more people than they could probably possibly have. In a single battalion. But it's like, who cares?
Yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is, that is who cares, but I guess I'm saying for me, it also, like, works, because everything already feels weirdly dreamlike. Like I said, you said something interesting, which is like the plot feels like sci-fi in a sense.
Not in a, it is. It's not in a, I don't know what you mean by in a sense.
Okay, I'm not trying to weaken your words. I'm just saying it's interesting you say that because this originally, they had a writer who, Walt Williams, in his book, refers to him as Mr. Sunshine, who was working on this game back when, the concept was just military shooter in Dubai. Mm-hmm. And it was going to be completely about a climate change story where the bad guy had some sort of weather machine. And Walt Williams rightly said, that's stupid. We're making a game about shooting people in the face. I think the plot should have to do with that. And according to Walt, this previous writer was very much just dead set on trying to kind of force a preachy climate change narrative, and in a way it doesn't work. So I don't know. That's kind of funny. So I guess maybe the implication was that the storm was going to be like man-made, but I don't know if that's true at all.
Right. So I think that's still there implicitly.
The weather machine?
No, not the weather machine, the climate change stuff.
That's what I was going to get to, is even though that's never mentioned, we're getting to the point where we're seeing, like, what was it, like Battlefield 52 or whatever the fuck the new one. It's like whole premise is based on you're a civilian forced into the military to fight for water because of and we've got awesome ninth generation climate storms that make the map super cool. So that, like, sort of that predicting it's like military action and warfare because of climate catastrophe.
Yeah, like that's still all there. Because like, why else would this sandstorm exist? Other than this some offshoot effect of climate change.
Right. And the implication that's like, oh, what if sandstorm hit one of our allies and we sent the military over to help them? Which I do think is kind of... okay, so I read like 3 books that either mention or talk about this game. One of them was like a digital-only book I read like right after I finished this game called Killing is Harmless, which is just a basically play-by-play analysis of this game.
Right, and it's also taken from one of those judgmental loading screen tips. Killing for yourself is... What is it? Killing for yourself is evil or
killing
something?
For your country is
heroic, and to kill for entertainment is harmless.
And I couldn't reread the whole thing, but what I was kind of stuck on was that it kind of was emblematic of a lot of the criticism of the time, which was a lot of people focused on just the violence in isolation. Like, people were focusing in on this game is about pointing out that you're killing so many people in a shooter. Isn't that fucking crazy?
Yeah.
And I just think it's interesting, like, that took up a lot of the airwaves and think pieces, and it's like that in retrospect. I mean, and that's how I was thinking about it, because
yes,
of course
but
it
in
blew my
retrospect,
mind.
there's other things there.
And not like that, but it's kind of, in my opinion, the least interesting way to analyze it. I mean, there's still stuff there, but I now want to look at it through, like, people were looking at this without like a hint of thinking about real world politics, which I mean that's expected, because you still have people whose opinions I otherwise respect will say things like Call of Duty 4 is anti-war because of the nuke scene, which is like just a baffling idea in itself.
Right.
And so I understand why maybe some of like any sort of like thinking about American imperialism might still go over people's head. Right,
because like people only understand anti-war as meaning like war's not fun.
Yeah, without talking about specific things.
Right, because like the nuke scene in Call of Duty 4.
War is hell.
War is hell. That doesn't mean war is bad. And
or
it also
not necessary.
It also doesn't mean we're not still the good guys.
Right.
Like, this is why I don't want to rant about like Platoon or something.
Right. I mean, I get what you're saying. Like,
this is kind of why Platoon is part of the pro-war propaganda.
It's part of, and also like the shoot and because it's like we have to do what's necessary and feel bad about it.
It's also that the nuke in Modern Warfare is literally a war crime committed against American soldiers that we're supposed to be righteously disgusted by.
Yeah, it's also saying, oh, they actually did have.
Yeah, also Iraq did have WMDs.
Like, it's so fucking crazy that so many people like don't talk about that really basic.
That really basic thing that the country we're invading is so clearly Iraq, and the fact that part of the premise of that scene is they really did have a nuke.
It's so awesome, and you're right. It is just to make them bad. Like,
right, we're supposed to be horrified by the suffering of our brave soldiers. Like, and that's not like. There are political philosophies that are fascinated by the great national humiliation that comes from losing a war you should have won. And they're not good. Like
the only like hint of is that you like rescue someone and it's like,
rescuing them was pointless.
I guess you shouldn't have gone back and rescued that pilot or whatever.
But I think everyone would have died no matter what.
Yeah, because it's a fucking nuke.
You're not gonna like buying yourself another 30 seconds of distance won't save you.
Yeah. Okay, and that's why this game. I was basically trying to feel out and I talked about this before, it's like, what's like the ballsiness meter on this game? And I guess part of it comes from that, yeah, Walt Williams is an American where he mentions that he was like, did some sort of work on like an Air Force base at some point in his life and felt uncomfortable with like the psychos there.
Really? That's awesome.
And he's working with a German studio who obviously have a different understanding of America's military.
You're not working with Americans.
And so it was like, the thing that makes me go, oh, this game's actually kind of ballsy, is the plot element of like, they go from Afghanistan to help an ally, and it is the worst thing you could imagine, and the game basically lands on, it's like, yeah, shouldn't have even tried to help, because the US military is not a tool for helping people.
Right, it'll just fuck it up. They will, no matter what their mission is, kill people, because that's what militaries are for.
That is the nail and hammer, and they're going to institute martial law.
When all you have is a hammer, everyone looks like everyone looks like a fucking tactical threat.
Yes, exactly.
Like, like, you have to do it. And it's like, and it also shows that, because the solution to the attempt to fix the American military fuck-up is to send in more members of the American military. Which
we haven't even talked about the main characters of this game.
So our main characters are...
I just want to lay out like kind of a working theory real quick of like how I see this game, which is, it's like, okay, they go to Dubai, then they send the CIA in to cover it up, and then they send 3 video game protagonists. And what I mean by that is, it's like, they explicitly say when they're making this game that they wanted Walker to be like an everyman, which of course they cast Nolan North. And
the generic video game protagonist.
My perception is, it's like, what if we sent a nice video game guy to like the most fucked up shit, as opposed to like the protagonist of like the Black Ops games, who are like literally the CIA psychos. And it's like, what if you sent like a quote unquote good person to do military shit in this situation?
And it's also that like it's because there's implicitly the reason they're there is because the army has no fucking idea what's happening.
Yeah, no radio.
The CIA is not talking to them, and the 33rd are obviously out of contact. So they are sent in basically by the army to figure out what's going on, and they don't even know the CIA is there.
Right, they don't know anything, and that's because it's a black hole.
All they know is they lost contact with Conrad, and we know later that he killed himself. But that's it. Like, they know Conrad radioed about a failed evacuation.
The thing that stuck out with me on this playthrough was, okay, so, I mean, we all know about Walker and his deal. The side character, like Lugo and Adams, there's not a whole lot, but there is interesting stuff with them. With, like, Lugo being kind of the kid or the least experienced of them, even though he's like a fucking Delta Squad guy, and Adams coming across more as like the closest you get to like the psycho who's ready to already do this shit.
Yes, but then, so that's something that actually kind of confused me, because remember the scene with Gould?
Yeah, and I think that's on purpose, that it's opposite what you'd expect.
That Lugo is the one who wants to kill Gould, save Gould and screw the civilians, and Adams is the one who cares about civilians.
Yeah, and I don't know, it just feels to me like I guess when you first play it, you are left with the impression it's like almost maybe you're gonna have like a devil and angel on your shoulder, because that's what like a dumber game would do, is like, oh, here's the character who will do anything to get it done, and here's the character who cares about civilians. And as you keep playing, it's like, that's not really true, and they're they're just making decisions like you. Where it's like, I don't know, it could go either way. I did what I thought was best at the time.
Yeah, especially because Lugo, of course, is the one who just shoots Radio Man in the fucking head twice. Like, and gets called a psycho by Adams for doing it. And that's because, I mean, Lugo just seems like he is the more emotional one.
Yeah, I'm thinking of that conversation, like, near the end of the game where they're separated and, like, Adams is like, I don't think, Lugo is gonna make it out of... Like, they're talking about him like he's, like, baby brother,
Yeah.
That's a good thing, though. He's more emotional. That's a good point.
Right. And that's the sequence that ends with him getting lynched and dying. And it's also, I mean, we're going to discuss the way they die, obviously, later. Because they die in very different ways, too.
The teammates, we talk about, like, it's not trying super hard to be, like, a tactical squad game. But, it's worth mentioning the combat barks. I think everybody knows about this, that they get harsher as the game goes on. Not much to say about it, except someone really should copy that, Like, we should be seeing that in more games. And then, of course, like, Walker gets more grizzled as you play, which the first time... I
like
remember
the changes to his character model.
The first time I remember seeing that was, like, Batman Arkham Asylum.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved that in the Batman games. Especially, because I actually played Arkham City, whatever. I played Arkham City first, and I just loved that when I realized that his suit was getting fucked up. And but it gets taken to extremes here. Where by the end of the game, Walker barely looks human by the end of the game.
Yeah.
Like, he gets and then, of course, in the epilogue, he's even more fucked up.
Yeah, it's just two things where it's like, in fact, reading the Walt's book, where when they were making this, they were like, has anyone done this yet? And it's like, no. And it feels like no one's done it since, and
Except
people really
Batman.
should. I guess the combat barks.
What?
The combat barks, more specifically. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, where he starts sounding more deranged.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like... Because the melee executions, they start feeling... They're already sort of shockingly brutal even at the beginning, but they start to feel even more ugly later.
I believe that you don't... There's a few animations that... I can't remember if it's just dialogue or if they have some new animations for you.
Because if I remember correctly, I might be making this up, where you do sort of, like the executions is like... It starts out, you just shoot them in the head once, and I think by the end of the game, you're like full automatic on them. But I might be making that up in my head.
I want to say that, like, he shoots a guy in the kneecap and then shoots a guy in the head. Yeah. I want to say, like, that animation doesn't play later. But I could be wrong, and it's just the visceral nature of him going, like, fuck you. Like, in a very...
Like, the feeling that he hates...
Yes.
He hates them by the end of the game. That doesn't exist at the beginning. Like, at the beginning, he's just sort of freaking out.
Oh, and then the other, like, small gameplay thing is the very slight slow motion you get sometimes with, like, shooting people in the head. It's so slight that it's like a very small stylistic choice. And I guess it's like you just get like a half second to, it's like, oh, just remember you're blowing someone's skull open, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, shall we talk about the
scene?
The scene?
Yes.
We should talk about a bit before, which is, they set it up, at least, like, where they have that great moment where everything slows down, and there's the first part with, like, white phosphorus. It's the first time you have to, like, take on, like, a heavy trooper, and so you get to experience that on the ground a bit, so you have that's like, oh, I mean, they even say it in, like, the dialogue where they go, you know what this shit does.
Yeah, and they're like, but I have to use it anyway.
Right.
And I remember, I want to talk about something.
Please.
Actually, let's talk about the scene, and then I'll talk about the thing that you read in the book.
Okay.
Which is, so, you get it is very much okay. So this is just the Call of Duty for AC 130 level.
Exactly.
But played for horror. Because you've got the sort of black and white thermal view from above, and you're dropping white phosphorus on these little white dots. The third man, little pale dots, and they go dark, and you just get told, drop it here, drop it here, drop it here. And then eventually, but then, of course, you go down, and you see that you were dropping white phosphorus on a refugee camp.
And even just before that, the fact that, imagine a scenario where there's no civilians and no big twist, but just the fact they make you walk through it.
Yeah, just because you never do that with the AC 130 level in Call of Duty. You never go down to that afterwards and see what you did. So there's that. And that was, so it's interesting because I now have a distinct memory. I had heard of that there was a white phosphorus sequence. That was the big moment. I think Yahtzee, because Yahtzee was like cute about it. He was like, just think of the words white phosphorus, because he didn't spoil it. And then I was going down and seeing all these dead soldiers and them crawling and screaming. And I was like, oh, this is what he's talking about.
Yeah, because it's already pretty horrific.
Right, and then they get to the crevice. And they see the refugees. And I was like, oh, no. Because I was disappointed at first. I was like, this isn't that horrifying.
Yeah, they almost set you up where it's like, no,
oh, this is as bad as it's going to get. Like, you almost think that's as bad as it'll get, and then they see the civilians and the children. And then it's like, oh.
Extra touch of, they could have just had a pile of corpses, but they have that image of a mother cradling her child, which is just, honestly, we talk about...
The fact they went out of their way clearly to make at least some of the corpses identifiable as children.
Yeah, we talk about
really helps the impact.
Kane and Lynch trying to be like sickening, and it's like this. Right. That part is still just viscerally sickening.
Yeah, disgusting. It is disgusting.
And the fact
you
that
did it. They made
when you're imagining Conrad at the end of the game, he's painting that scene.
Right, because it's in Walker's head. It's the only thing Walker can think about.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up like the AC-130 gunner mission.
Right. Because that is like the most sickening, immoral shit possibly in video game history.
What's interesting is, like I said, this scene still works because of what we just talked about. But there is this weird... meta quality of this is horrifying, but it brings me comfort. Oh, that a big student, they made this and knew it was horrifying. And ironically, the other one feels in a way more horrifying because the people who made this thought it was cool. And that like makes it more sickening.
It's seeing it is the difference. It's the difference between watching Schindler's List and watching The Eternal Jew. And I know that's really like fucking inflammatory or whatever, but you know what I mean.
Okay.
The Eternal Jew is a Nazi propaganda film.
Okay, thank you.
So it's the difference between seeing it depicted by someone who's trying to make you think it's wrong and seeing it told through the eyes of someone who either thinks it's good or doesn't care. Like, genuinely, the creator of this thought it was cool. And it's the most disgusting thing ever.
Yes, that's well said. Yeah.
It is like watching some of those, like the movies Joseph Goebbels produced. And I know that's inflammatory. Yeah. I know I'm breaking Godwin's law. but it's like, true.
This goes back to the thing I was talking about with like Walker and, as a character where it's like, he's actually horrified by this thing. Versus the other games where it's like, which are in a sense closer to reality, where it's like, oh yeah, the guys doing this were probably like making jokes and stuff. It is a fiction and a fantasy that there's a devised scenario where people actually be horrified enough by it,
Right. But if you do that, then it's just like people would actually turn off the game.
Yeah.
Because then Walker just becomes a completely...
Oh, yeah. I mean...
unlikable character.
Well, it's funny you said that, because there are people who did just turn off the game there.
Well, after they learned they'd burn children alive.
Yeah.
That in the game, they had pushed the button to burn these kids alive. Yeah. I can understand why.
We got to talk about, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about this scene, which is, there was a great IGN interview where they interviewed Walt Williams about this game. And one of the guys was like, sorry, I actually, like, it didn't, he said it nicely, but it's like, it didn't leave as big of an impact on me because I guessed it. And of course, he didn't have knowledge of it beforehand. It's like, yeah, if you're savvy enough, you can kind of tell that big clump there is civilians. And now, where, of course, just like we're doing, we're talking about the white phosphorus scene, and if you haven't played this, now you know. Yes, and this is all predicated on
civilians,
making you feel guilty, and this is like one of the most discussed things about this, or it's like, should a game make you feel guilty?
About
even
things it makes you do.
Yes.
That is something that is always brought up as a negative criticism of this game. Because it's not making you feel guilty for a choice. Like a game like The Walking Dead would.
And I can understand, like, okay, maybe it just doesn't have quite the impact on you, but people will say, well, like, fuck this game for, saying things that it made me do, and of course that goes to the whole game where it's like, is this game, does the guilt trip work at all? Because, yeah, it does try to guilt you in really obvious ways. And I could see how that can come across as just kind of like, okay, what do you want from me? I'm just playing your game, man.
Yes, and that is why... that's why the trick of making you think this is going to be a generic military shooter has to be there.
And I guess all my brain power was dedicated to figuring out where it's like, if that trick doesn't work, does this game completely fall flat?
Yes.
And and of course that's a personal question, but it doesn't for me, and I think it still works because you have that distance of Walker is a character. Yeah. It's not you. He is a character, and at the end of the day, it's still a story about this character, and even though it talks to you, you could still just follow it as the story of a deranged man. And we talked about with The Last of Us, but this is the game people always compare it to, where it's like, oh, it's trying to make you feel guilty. And I guess I still think it leaves that space for you to, okay, just go on this journey with this character. You don't have to take it personally, The other thing was, at certain points in development, they did want to create like a branching narrative where you didn't kill, you could refuse to do the white phosphorus.
Yes, that's what I wanted to talk about. Yes,
which is pretty early on, but that's pretty unfeasible for just like that sort of branching path. And honestly, I can't even conceptualize what that would. How could you? What would that? What are even the implications of that? Because you're still like a piece of shit, but if you keep playing the game, but just don't murder civilians. But I don't know. That's just discussing a game that doesn't exist. So
Yeah, like the hypothetical world where you don't. The hypothetical version of the game where you don't do that.
The easier hypothetical is the design where they wanted to make, because you're like on top of a building and it's very obvious that you can't progress unless you choose the white phosphorus. And there's even like some meta dialogue that goes, Lugo says there's always a choice, and Walker goes, there really isn't. And originally they wanted to have you be able to walk down there and try and fight your way through the map. So even though you couldn't get through it, you could at least be more tricked that you made an actual choice.
Wait, say that again?
So they wanted to make you walk, like, the area you go after you fire the white phosphorus. They wanted to make you be able to go down to that area before firing the white phosphorus to just fight guys, see if you could get through there without using the white phosphorus.
But it would be impossible.
But it would be impossible. That way you could at least be tricked into thinking it was a choice.
Oh, that you gave up.
Yeah, and
like, maybe if you had tried again.
And I believe they said it was just like, hardware limitations. And I think that's a shame, because I do think that is probably the right answer. Even if you can't offer some
create a choice that doesn't exist, yeah.
Yeah, because even if you can't offer that branching path, it does feel a little like, yeah, you're walled in here. And maybe contributed to why some people just couldn't work with that scene,
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about white phosphorus?
So, it's interesting, because obviously that's also, the fact they chose to portray white phosphorus. Right?
Yeah, which became, like,
because
a non-controversy later with, like, some Call of Duty kill streaks using white phosphorus.
Right, but the fact that, like, white phosphorus was extensively used in Iraq. Right? Like, it was involved, and there have always been allegations of illegal use, or, not even allegations, but allegations of criminal use of white phosphorus in civilian areas by Israel. Yeah, so, like, white phosphorus being portrayed as... That is deeply political, to portray the use of white phosphorus as just crossing a line, as deeply evil, is, like... That's clearly a statement, given the fact that the U.S. and our allies routinely, especially at the time, and still today, even if they deny it, routinely use white phosphorus against pretty crowded urban areas.
Yeah.
Like, it was used... did that Fallujah game ever come out?
No, but I think it's going to still come out. And again, a great example of, like, that game is probably extremely horrifying.
What, Fallujah?
The 6 Days in Fallujah game.
Wasn't there a controversy where the creator said he would not show any U.S. war crimes?
I can't remember the specific stuff, but it was like, we're making a tactical shooter that will honor the U.S. military.
Yeah. Oh, so you think it's going to be horrifying because it's going to be psychotic? Like, the perspective...
Yeah, like in the AC-130 way is what I'm trying to say.
Right, okay, yeah. Not deliberately, but, like, horrifying of, like, making a video game of Fallujah, and it's not even... Like, even if you made the Fallujah game and it was doing the Spec Ops The Line thing, using a real war might still be too far. Because it's still a video game, you are still doing it. And you're still, like, having fun, quote unquote.
Do you know why it was like canceled back in 2013, like the original version?
Why?
It was because one of the it was like Fox News people, like one of the moms of one of the, like, soldiers was like, because you're seeing video games as very trite and silly, and it's
right,
like,
inherently offensive.
You're making a game out of the something my son died for. That's why it was canceled the first time.
Well, okay, I'm looking at the Wikipedia page. It was also criticized by, like, the Stop the War Coalition.
Yeah, I remember seeing a lot of that.
In America, I'm sure that was way more widespread. Especially given what we talked about this in the fucking Last of Us 2 episode, right?
Right.
What the discourse around games on the right, like the conservative discourse around games was at that time.
It kind of follows... Yeah, that's exactly right, yeah.
Because when they announced, like, last year that they were bringing it back, I personally saw all the criticism as being like, this is just war crime apologia.
Right.
And that might just be more of my point of how much the discourse around gaming has shifted.
Yeah, I think it really is.
Is that, like... Now the criticism is that this isn't negative enough about the U.S. military, which is correct. Like,
yes, that is the right opinion.
It is insane to make a game about Fallujah where you just don't, as you explicitly say, you're not going to depict what the Americans actually did in Fallujah.
Yeah, and it was also...
Like, that's insane.
I remember watching, like, the trailer, and what seemed kind of crass about it, more than just usual, it was like a very much... You know how they sell video games, where it's like, there's like randomly generated buildings for you to tactically break into. Like, when you're selling the features in a very video...
doing that in a real battle. How many people died in Fallujah? How many people died in the Second Battle of Fallujah?
Don't know off the top of my head.
About 2,100 people were killed. Real people died. And, like, real people died in World War II, too, right?
Yeah, but it's always like, okay, people are grown enough to where, yeah, it's no longer, I can't believe you're turning this into a video game. It's now understanding, I can't believe you're turning this into that video game.
Because it's not like, because people were mad at, I remember that it's a similar controversy about the Modern Warfare remake of creating a fictional version of the Highway of Death where the Russians do it instead of the Americans.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which is just fucking insane. Like, just describing a real American war crime, but saying the Russians did it?
Yeah, it's like, nah, it was Russians, yeah. Something for you to be outraged about.
Yeah, and like...
Which I suppose in a really long-term sense, that's what the nuke was, if you're thinking a really grand scale.
I mean, yeah, if you think of, like, the Americans actually did this, but what if the bad guys, like...
What if the bad guys did what we did? Wouldn't that be fucked up, yo?
Yeah.
So... back to this game, it's almost instructional, where it's, again... maybe this game taught you, if you're a fucking dumbass high schooler, this game taught you what white phosphorus was, and it shows you what and how bad it is, and that's pretty ballsy. Mark that one for the ballsiness meter. I suppose the last thing I want to bring up on kind of this topic, we're talking about kind of with the Fallujah thing. I remember the YouTuber goes by Super Bunny Hop. This game didn't work for him, and he said something about he played a lot of Arma 2 at one point. And you know what Arma is?
Yes, I know what Arma is.
Yeah, and that's a very simulationist. People love to, fucking hardcore role play in it. Mm-hmm. I believe it's based off of like an actual military training tool that they...
Right, America's Army is what that was called, I believe.
Yeah, and of course, his point was like, yeah, this is more horrifying because this is a more accurate simulation of war. And this game is basically, it's like, yeah, this is awesome, and we're going to teach you how to do all the cool shit. And he posed this very specific question back, like, in, I don't know, like 2013, where it's like, what if you did Spec Ops story, but with the gameplay of a more, like, simulationist shooter? Because Spec Ops The Line is a, silly action game.
Right.
And I know, it's like a what if, but like I understand the point he's trying to make.
Okay, but I'm going to disagree with it. In that, like, the simulationist approach isn't supposed to make you horrified. It's supposed to make you more able to jack off by feeling like you're in the army.
That's always the thing, though.
It's not
that's
eye of the beholder.
Yeah, but it is an interesting idea. It's like, what if, could you do a more simulationist approach that is trying to, like, break through to someone who would otherwise think it's fucking rad? And I don't know, because that probably won't be tried. Because most of those games, like, for example, Ready or Not, which is like the follow-up to like the SWAT games, As far as I can tell, like people like those games absolute psychos. I mean, I like that. I like SWAT 4, but I don't feel good about it. But I don't know. Spec Ops is so tied into the genre conventions with its story that it's out of the question to even kind of like try to imagine that. But yeah, I just thought it was worth bringing up. But I think that's all I got for. I think that's all I got for the White Phosphorus scene, and probably this episode. Any last things?
No, not really. I mean, I have some other stuff, but I'm going to save it for part 2.
Whoa, there's never been so much fun. 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 Go up to your brother, kill him with your gun, leave him lying in his uniform, down in the sun. Whoa. Whoa, there's never been so much fun. 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 Go up to your brother, kill him with your gun, leave him lying in his uniform, down in the sun.